The first 5 episodes of Dexter Resurrection have already come out. I'm absolutely obsessed. It's got me in a chokehold. I have been in a roller coaster of emotions for these first 5 episodes. We are at the midway point. The only thing that keeps me wondering, there's many things that keep me wondering, but is Dexter Morgan finally going to be caught as the Bay Harbor Butcher this year? Hi guys, welcome back to April After Dark. Long time no see. I just want to go ahead and not waste any time and get right into the TV show series that I'm absolutely obsessing over. And I missed, the first 2 episodes where I'd already made notes where I was going to review it and give my theories, but now that we're in Dexter Resurrection all the way to episode 5 as of last Friday, I figured I could just skim through these first 5 episodes, share some things that maybe theories I had that I was wrong about and stuff that I was maybe right about, and then there's some stuff obviously that hasn't happened yet, so I don't know what's going on with some of that. But if you like Dexter Resurrection, I will be doing the last 5 episodes, because I want to say it's 10 episodes this season. I will do, episode 6 next weekend, then episode 7, 8, and so forth. So I'm not going to go like every little moment that happens in the first several episodes, just because I hope if you're watching this and you see that it's episodes 1 through 5 that you would have already seen it. And just be warned, if not, this video will contain spoilers for Dexter Resurrection episodes 1 through 5. For me, the first 2 episodes kind of fall in together, so if I speak out of turn about something that may have happened in episode 2 and I'm talking about episode 1, just forgive that. Both those episodes sort of mold in together, but I will do my best to try to keep it episode by episode. So, yes, A Beating Heart is the name of the first episode, and that is obviously Dexter's heart, because this takes off after Dexter New Blood, which was back in 2021, and no one liked the way that ended. Most people didn't like the way it ended. I couldn't stand the way it ended, and hopefully you've seen that by now, but spoiler ahead, Harrison, the son of Dexter, shoots Dexter, and we're left to think that he died in the snow. So when they decided to bring back Dexter Resurrection, I was thinking, how are they going to explain this, because they kind of put themselves into a corner where it's going to be something kind of far-fetched to explain why he's alive and also why he's not, in jail or prison, because the last episode of New Blood, his ex-girlfriend, Chief Bishop, Angela, was so gung-ho about, getting him behind bars, and she had, contacted Angel Batista. We see all that. We never see the showdown, so that was a really huge letdown back in New Blood. But she's told him things, and that she thinks he's the Bay Harbor Butcher. So Angel still having all these thoughts about stuff that LaGuerta had told him, who is his ex-wife. Things that she couldn't let go of, that she really truly believes that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher, and obviously we know that's correct. We never got to see that showdown. So the episode starts, Dexter's in a coma. We learned that he's been in a coma for 10 weeks after the gunshot wound. Apparently the weather, it was so cold over there that it slowed his heart rate, and he was able to somehow come out of it and not die. And then there's question. He has all these hallucinations, or maybe they're dreams, I'm not really sure. And the minute I heard John Lithgow's voice, my heart dropped. So he's talking, and he definitely talks way more than he did in his cameo in New Blood. And that one was just a scene. It wasn't really anything in New Blood. But this one, he actually has a conversation, and he talks more, and he does say a line about, you have to go through hell to achieve resurrection. So here we go with resurrection again, the title. He gets a visit from, or he hallucinates, whatever you want to say, or dreams about Miguel Prado, which I was not expecting to see Jimmy Smits, but I thought that was a really cool touch. And then obviously Harry comes back, and I'm happy to see Harry again. And then we get Dokes, and he does his famous surprise, motherfucker, you know, whatever. And then he basically tells them, you have a kernel of good in you, you need to go find your son, this, that, and the other. And that was a pretty funny scene, to be honest with you. And then he comes out of his coma, I want to say, and, oh, what is it, no, not Chief, this cop, Teddy, that we knew from Iron Lake, comes, and he's talking about all this stuff, and he says, you know, Angela felt so awful for, you know, misjudging the whole thing, you know, with Logan, because as we see in New Blood, Dexter kills Logan because Logan was going to shoot him. They see that there was a bullet that went, so it's just self-defense, so there's charges dropped about that, and Angela has a picture to give Dexter, and it says, it's a picture of her and her passed on friend Iris, who was part of the entire Kurt Caldwell murders in New Blood from that season. So because he basically helped her find, you know, the museum that Kurt Caldwell had, and that he did kill her friend so many years back, this case that had been plaguing her forever, she says, we're even, now get the hell out of Iron Lake. So they tried to wrap that up in a little bow for me to believe, but it's hard for me to believe because I don't know, maybe because she was just so gung-ho about putting him behind bars and really getting him and making sure everybody knew he was the Bay Harbor Butcher. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that she just flipped like that. And maybe it would have been more believable if they had actually had a scene with the actress that played her that says, you know, I'm not going to do this, we're even, blah, 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 instead of this handoff. And they want to make sure Dexter doesn't want to press charges on the Iron Lake Police Department. So he gets out of that, but like I said, it's just a little unbelievable, but you know, the show did put themselves in a place where I don't know how they were going to come out of explaining that without making it sound kind of far-fetched, which it was. Yet the scene we've all been waiting for, Batista shows up there. You know, and I know Dexter is surprised. He sees him and he says, please let this be another hallucination. And he hugs him and he says, nope, not a hallucination, it's really him in the flesh. And he's like, it's like seeing a ghost. He's like, I know. And then he basically says, you know, it was weird, you know, Chief Bishop, who I guess was your ex-girlfriend, called and was sure that you were the Bay Harbor Butcher. And I love how Dexter goes, the fuck? Like, it's so crazy of her to think this. But he plays it off. He goes, she must have really been mad at me for her to say that. We had a very volatile relationship. And he's like, yeah, shooting you, thinking you're a serial killer, that is pretty crazy. And then he adds in all this stuff about the odd thing is that, you know, LaGuerta was always so sure that you were the Bay Harbor Butcher. Isn't that crazy? But we all know that Dokes was the Bay Harbor Butcher, right? So all of this is happening, and for me, when I watched this episode at first, I was having trouble figuring out, is Batista just going to be as oblivious as he's always been throughout the OG series to Dexter and just believe his stories, you know, and just not believe him? Or is he going to definitely think, oh no, now I know that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher? I couldn't tell at first. I was having a hard time telling, and I thought that was cool that I couldn't tell. Well, then on a second rewatch, I noticed during that conversation when he says, I'm going to come visit you tomorrow, he's smiling, Batista is, and then when he turns, when Dexter isn't looking at him, his face drops. And then I remember looking at that and thinking, oh no, he definitely doesn't believe that Dexter is not the Bay Harbor Butcher. He truly believes it now. So I thought that was interesting, because at first I thought, oh, is this just going to be a thing where he somehow slips through the cracks of another Miami Metro person and they don't believe, you know, they believe his stories and whatever, but I don't think so. And as the episodes go, we figure that out pretty quickly, that Batista is definitely believing that he is the Bay Harbor Butcher. So we see that, let's see, we're in New York now. We see where Harrison is. They show him, I think he's a bellhop at the Empire Hotel, and they also show us his morning routine. and I guess he's living at the hotel. You know, with eating certain food, flossing, brushing his teeth, which you know, it was a great callback to the OG series when they showed Dexter's routine in the morning, and they also did this in Original Sin. And you know, they all take huge bites out of stuff, you know, just like Dexter does, the guy that played young Dexter, Patrick Gibson in Original Sin, and then obviously Harrison. They all eat the same way. They do that on purpose. But I liked the little morning routine that we see of Harrison's. I thought it was somewhat similar to Dexter's. I love the setting of New York. You know, Iron Lake was cool because it was just such a departure from Miami. But Miami was a very busy city, and there was definitely a lot of, you know, bad stuff going down there, and you can definitely agree that that's what's going on in New York as well. It's a gritty city, and there's two different lines from people. It's, you know, New York is a great place to disappear, or New York is a great place to become whoever you want. There's a girl in an elevator that Harrison meets because he's the bellhop, and she says that, I want to say, to him. So, so anyway, we see Harrison works there. He has a friend, a female friend. He gets his GED. She gave him the letter. You know, we're seeing all that. Figure out he lives at the hotel. I guess she lets him just stay in a room that maybe somebody was in before, and or they're not going to clean. I don't know how she does it, but he lives there, and no one knows that besides her. So back to the girl that he was talking to, was like, can you help me find this medical conference? And I want to say her name was Shauna. Later on, because there's this guy that's at the hotel that, you know, Harrison's doing all these errands for, and this guy's bragging about him, like, oh, I love this guy, he's the best. And then, you know, the Stefan, I want to say, is the manager, is like, oh yeah, we only hire the best. But you can tell he doesn't really like Harrison that much, this hotel manager guy. But he has a watch, and he says, this thing quit on me, can you find any way that you could get it working, like a place that maybe they could fix it? So that will come into play later on. Later on, as the night goes on, Shauna, the girl that Harrison met already, he sees her stumbling, and that guy Ryan, the same guy I was just talking about, is like kind of getting into her. Can you help me get her into the elevator? And he's like, my wife just had a little bit too much to drink. And immediately Harrison knows that's a lie. You know, he's not married, and that's not his wife. And I think he's trying to ignore it and just not, you know, this is not my problem. And he says something like, I didn't know you were married. And then the guy says, well, why would you know that? And he's kind of getting almost, just take us to the room and help me with her in the room. Harrison goes ahead and said, you know, I know she's not your wife. Her name is Shauna, and she's here for a medical conference. And basically we end up finding out that this guy is like a serial sexual predator. I'll put it that way. I don't want to say the wrong word on here that isn't cool to say, but you know what it is, the R word. He roofied her. That's what happened. And he says, you know, she won't remember. And Harrison, you know, tries to just ignore this. He's like, it's not my problem, it's not my problem, it's not my problem. And then he hears her scream, and his, you know, hero part of him comes out, and he barges into the room. Shauna, are you okay? And you know, the Ryan guy gets really pissed off at him and says, mind your own, you know, this is my thing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then Harrison, I think he just loses it. He punches him, they fight, and this is what gets him, you know. He's like, fine, take her. There's plenty more where she came from. Like, he's going to continue doing this, and this is kind of a thing that reminds me of Dexter and what Dexter does. Like, I'm going to stop you from doing further harm to whoever. And Harrison just loses and impulsively kills Ryan, which I was not expecting that so quickly. I was not expecting Harrison to murder somebody episode 1 like this. And it's very similar to Dexter, but, you know, we see this and he's kind of like, oh crap, because it's impulsive. And most of the time, that there's a difference with Harrison and Dexter. Dexter doesn't do things impulsively. He you know, he stalks and he figures out what he's going to do and he plans it. And Harrison does not do that. I mean, even the shooting of Dexter that he did was impulsive. That was impulsive. He kind of goes off of his anger and makes rash decisions. So then, I don't know how he did this. He basically cleans everything up. He learned all the stuff from Dexter. He keeps hearing Dexter, you know, in his head whenever they were cleaning or doing the Kurt Caldwell thing, because he was there when he chopped up the body. So he takes it down to the kitchen and he he cuts them all up. And I was thinking this is kind of weird because in New Blood, Harrison seemed a little disgusted, I don't know, weirded out or grossed out by the actual thing, and I was too, because they never really had showed us, I don't know, the sawing limbs and I don't know. So I don't know how he was able to do it. He chops him up, he puts him in bags, he ties him a certain way. I think it's the same way Dexter might have tied him. I don't remember for sure. And he hears the trash people, he runs out there, he throws the bags out there, and then as soon as they leave, he throws up. So he is definitely not the same. He is bothered by what he did, he's haunted by what he did. And prior to this, he had a flashback of seeing Iron Lake where he shot his dad, so he's also bothered by that, and he has nightmares about it. So they're not the same. Dexter isn't bothered by, you know, what he does. I think he feels like a release, you know, when he does this, but Harrison does not. So that's interesting. It's a different dynamic. We go back to Iron Lake. Dexter is having his physical therapy, and the lady is talking about some murder that happened in New York. And did you hear about that in the hotel? You know, some guy cut up into 9 pieces, and immediately Dexter's like, oh my God, that's got to be Harrison, because there's no way it's not him. So he immediately thinks, oh my gosh, I have to make sure that he didn't mess anything up, screw anything up, leave anything behind. So he's immediately like, I've got to get out of here. He steals a truck from somebody that had just died, that didn't have any family or friends, that was also in this Seneca Nation clinic. He steals, he takes his keys and takes that truck, and it's this goofy looking truck with, like, I believe, and all this alien stuff and camouflage. It's kind of ridiculous looking, but he drives all the way out there. But prior to that, the problem is that Batista got there early to see Dexter, and he sees that he's there, so he makes a fake phone call to the front desk, and he's like, you know, may I speak to Batista? This is Detective Quinn, you know. And I thought that since they said Quinn like that he must be appearing, because I don't know. I just don't know why he'd mention it like that. And then also I've seen Desmond Harrington in, you know, he was at the premiere of the show, and also he was in the Original Sin Final Cut, like little extra things that they put, just fun stuff for fans to look at. It's like very short, where Jamie Chung from New Blood just, you know, ask them questions. They talk about the show, the episode, all this stuff. So I was like, Quinn's got to be coming back at some point. So anyway, then Dexter escapes, and obviously then all you're thinking about is, well, now that's what I thought immediately. Now Batista's definitely going to know that something's up with him, but it's really because he was running, because he wanted to help make sure that Harrison didn't screw anything up. So we go to New York. He gets there somehow. He randomly, he sees him at that hotel just outside, and he doesn't approach him. He doesn't want to approach him yet. He's not comfortable with the idea of doing that, but he does make his way into the hotel, Dexter, and finds the room, checks everything out. He has this proud papa moment where, oh, I don't see anything. He did a good job cleaning. Knew this, knew that, and Ghost Harry is kind of like, I don't think that's something to be happy about. But it's kind of funny because Dexter is excited, and he's like, yeah, proud dad moment. He's like, he may be following in my footsteps, and somehow he figures out where into the kitchen, and then he does see the speck of blood up there, and he gets rid of it. And good thing for that, because there's this annoying, detective Claudette Wallace that comes out in episode 2, because those bags break apart and a leg or an arm come out, and then they start investigating it. They figure out, they put the body back together. They figure out that there's a watch that's missing. I guess maybe there might have been a tan line or something, which now you remember, the watch that Harrison had it, and I think he took it somewhere. And I do remember this when I did a rewatch, is that Stefan guy, that hotel manager guy that was standing right there, he saw Harrison take that watch. So there's that. I don't know how that's going to come into play. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be a good thing. So this detective, she sees things differently. She puts on Staying Alive to figure out her stuff, and she said those bags are tied a certain way. It's just her character is annoying, but that may be by design, I don't know. And so that, I think, is in episode 2. But back to episode 1, we get introduced to Uma Thurman, and don't know what person's apartment she's at that she breaks into, and she's wearing masks to make sure there's no cameras, and she's walking around looking through stuff, and all you can think, because you just don't know, is, I don't know whose apartment she's in, but she finds this killer's trophies because she's definitely associated with this organization that has serial killers involved. So she finds where this guy's trophies are, and it's in a binder, sorcery binder, and it's got like licenses, and there's blood like X on each of their faces, and when she sees it, she's like, you know, freaking psycho. So she's bothered by it, but she puts money and this invitation in there for whoever this guy is to see when he brings his next trophy in. Short intermission, my camera battery died. I think the last thing I was talking about was Uma Thurman's character, you know, getting into this apartment and figuring out, obviously it's an apartment of a serial killer, and we do find this out later in the second episode, but at the time you don't know, you know, whose apartment it is, except that it's definitely going to be involved in this Peter Dinklage serial killer hangout that's coming at some point. And the one thing I wanted to note was I always pay attention to music in television shows and movies. I always have since I was a child, and they are specifically playing this really old song, Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and they're playing it whenever Uma Thurman is breaking into this apartment and looking around for something. And this song is very famously used in the Scream franchise, which I love, but the other funny thing about it is that the first movie I ever heard Red Right Hand was one of my favorite movies, Dumb and Dumber, and it's in the beginning when Jim Carrey, you know, goes to the supermarket and he comes out with this like huge overinflated cowboy hat, and he's got all his groceries, and he sees like something, a dirty magazine or something, or newspaper, I don't know, in this thing, and he doesn't have the change, so he's gonna go and get change, and there's this little old lady on a motorized cart, and she ends up stealing all of this stuff because he said something about old people and it offended her. But during that scene they're playing Red Right Hand, and that's the first time I ever heard that song. So that song is always a great callback to me for Dumb and Dumber and for Scream. Earlier, Harrison is definitely not the same as Dexter, so he is very much haunted and feels guilty about his crimes. You know, he has nightmares about seeing his dad, you know, like, didn't have to be this way, or he sees Ryan Foster's bashed-in face, like, coming after him, so he's haunted by it. And you know, in the original series and everything, Dexter never has this problem, so this is another thing that's very different, that they are very different. There's a scene, I don't remember where it is, but it's Ghost Harry and Dexter talking, and they're talking about Brian Moser, his brother, and I love that they showed the actor that played the young little boy version of Brian in Original Sin. I thought that was amazing, and I also thought it was cool that Dexter was like, you know, he didn't have a mother either because of you, talking to Harry. And at this point I was really hoping that we will see more scenes of Original Sin, and we definitely do, and I love that they're tying Original Sin into Resurrection and the OG series, obviously. It's all, you know, connected, and I love that. Then we get into episode 2, which is called Camera Shy. This is where we meet the quote-unquote dark passenger killer, who is a murderer who basically goes after your car drivers, which is this universe's, you know, Uber or Lyft or whatever. It's called Your Car. And it's interesting because, you know, when this guy, he's got a hoodie on, you know, he's kind of got the same build, same height, almost sounds like Michael C. Hall, but because he's got the hoodie on, at first I thought it was Dexter in the car, and then real quickly I figured out it wasn't, but he definitely almost seemed like him from what I could hear and see until he starts to, and then they really show his face, and it's like, oh no, that's not Dexter. And originally when I first saw the trailers for Resurrection, and I kept seeing like newspaper things and clippings that would say Dark Passenger Killer Strikes Again, I originally thought that was going to be Harrison, because Harrison knows that that's what Dexter calls his urge to kill. Not many people know that besides people from the past that are, you know, no longer alive, but I actually thought that was going to be Harrison, and I was wrong about that. It turns out it's this guy, who he gets like this sort of saw thing, and he gets, you know, behind their neck, which reminded me of the very first episode of Dexter, because that's how he gets, not the same weapon, but that's how he gets that guy that was messing with that choir, you know, teacher or director in very first episode of Dexter. It reminded me of just the callback to that, like him being behind the seat and getting him and like making him drive somewhere. So this dark passenger killer, it's pretty gruesome. He basically decapitates them, and it really does seem like he gets off on their torture by asking questions like, who's going to miss you? And this guy has pictures of his little kids up there, and it's awful. You know, he loves that he's making this guy suffer. And then the next day there's these kids that are going to do graffiti, and they see a decapitated body, and it's just really gross and gruesome. So we were introduced to that killer, and his name turns out to be Ronald Schmidt, and Dexter is the one that finds out later on when he's vetting him is that he goes by Red. So interesting, when I look back at episode 1, when Uma Thurman was at that apartment, it turns out it is Ronald Schmidt's apartment, so they were following this dark passenger killer, and he goes by Red. But Dexter finds that out because of the work, the place that he works at. We meet another very important character, another your car driver named Blessing Kamara. Really sweet guy. I don't know what it is I love when I hear him talk. I just love his voice and his cadence. And he's just a real sweet guy. And we meet him, you know, I'm not going to get into all the details about that, but we meet him, and you know, that's where Dexter finds out about this killer and that he's called the Dark Passenger. And right off the bat, Dexter's immediately like really bothered by, that's my name. Like, I should have trademarked my name. You know, he says in his inner monologue. So then he's like, how do you go about becoming your car driver? And he's like, I'll send you the link. And so the whole reason he's doing this is to kill this guy who stole his, you know, his little name that he had for his urge to kill. Blessing also, you know, invites Dexter to his family, like a party that he's having, and he says, and I have a friend that's also a your car driver that was almost murdered by the Dark Passenger. He'll be at this party. And so in the end, Dexter goes to this party just because he wants to get more information about this killer. And what happens is the guy did have a video, the guy that escaped. It's just part of his ear was cut off. Awful. He sees the guy, and the thing is, with the hoodie on, he's got like a camera shy hoodie where it's got something on it that infrared light, so if there's a camera or a light that shines on it, it whites out the person's face. So he's very elusive, and you just can't see who it is, which makes sense why no one's caught the guy. But you know, Dexter figures that out. Then he starts to zoom in on the video because he sends himself the video, and he sees this backpack that says Bridge Data Network. And initially, and I was wrong about this, initially I thought that somehow that was tied to the serial killer, you know, gala or the organization, the society of these serial killers. I thought it was tied to that, but I was wrong about that. That's just where this guy works. And then Dexter does all of his stuff, his vetting, and he figures out his name is Ronald Schmidt, and there is like hardly any information online about him. So this guy has stayed very elusive and very hidden, which makes me wonder how, you know, how did Uma Thurman, you know, find all this out? It's interesting, but we'll get there. We'll get there. And also at this party, Blessing has a daughter that's moving out. She does acupuncture, but she's moving away somewhere else with her boyfriend or husband, I'm not sure. And he offers the apartment down, you know, basically this basement area to Dexter to live at, since Dexter is living at a motel. Dexter reluctantly agrees, and so, you know, he's going to stay in town because of Harrison, even though Harrison doesn't currently know that he's there. And he seems to be battling with revealing himself because he's like, he thinks I'm dead and he may not even want to see me, but I'm going to make sure he's taken care of, and you know, he doesn't make any mistakes, and I'm just going to be there to watch him. So we have a new place for Dexter to live, and he becomes he's going to become a your car driver. We see Uma Thurman again, and this time it appears she might be in Michigan, and there's some guy, I think his name is Keith, and he is at his ATM trying to get money. There's zero, like nothing in there. Charlie appears, which is Uma Thurman's character, and she's like, no luck, huh? And then he turns around, he's like, oh, hi Charlie, what are you doing in town? And, anyway, and she goes, well, follow or come with me. And he says, oh, I'm kind of busy right now. And she says, that wasn't a request. So, I don't know what's about to you don't really know what's about to happen. So they go out to her van or truck or whatever, and she basically says, no demands, no requests. So I'm assuming, I don't really know, that maybe this Keith guy was requesting more money, because obviously this organization gives money to serial killers, maybe in turn for their trophies. And he says something like, well, I have way more trophies that, would make it worth his while if I could have that, whatever amount of money. And, he just keeps, Charlie gets his weapon. So she got into his house, and she said it was behind the Christmas decorations, but it's this bat. It's got like nails and stuff in it. And he's called the Canton Clubber. So he's another serial killer who I guess was part of this, and he's out of money, or maybe asked for money, and he tries to come towards her after she said, you just need to leave us alone, disappear, forget you even know us, and then, nothing will happen. But he didn't do that, and so it's obvious she ends up killing him. So that's interesting that Uma Thurman killed him. So this organization thing is very mysterious and interesting. Harrison is still very haunted by seeing, he goes on a bender one night from having a nightmare, and he keeps seeing, the Ryan guy, and then he also he sees the true Dexter, clutching his chest, because of the heart, the bullet, the wound, kind of, by the hotel, because he had been cleaning up, making sure there was nothing left behind that Harrison didn't mess. But Harrison thinks it's a hallucination, so he thinks he's really going crazy, but it actually was Dexter. And that Claudette Wallace person, she's already getting suspicious of Harrison, and Harrison does not have the same sort of poker face that his dad does, so it's another difference between the two of them. He just looks guilty. He looks like he wants to cry out what he's done at every given moment when he's questioned or, made uncomfortable and interrogated. Oh, something I was going to say, I love the intros and the outros. It's very much exactly the way that New Blood was, and I thought that was a really cool look back then. So I like that they continued on with this. Some people don't like the beginning intro where they show, there's the episode title, and they show all the 7 different real quick flashes of what's to come in the episode. Some people don't like that. I guess maybe they think it's spoiling it for them. I don't mind it because it's so quick that I don't know. I mean, I can't make heads or tails of what is happening, really, and honestly it doesn't bother me because I'm about to see it in the next 45 minutes, so what does it really matter? But yeah, some people don't like that. I actually don't mind it. And then I also noticed the blood theme at the end of each episode. It's or this past one anyway, the 2, it's echoing and echoing and echoing, so I really like all the variations that they do of the blood theme. I think that's really cool, and I love that. And also I was going to say, for the way New Blood ended and how I was so mad about that, the way that they're carrying this resurrection makes that it directly connects to New Blood, kind of, and it doesn't feel disjointed, it feels very connected to it. It actually makes up for how bad that ending was, and that now I don't mind New Blood. It's really changed my opinion because of this, so kudos to them for that, in my opinion. We get into episode 3, which is called Backseat Driver. Clearly, this is going to have to do with the serial killer, the dark passenger, and then Dexter being a your car driver. It starts Dexter is a really bad your car driver because there's a guy in the back seat, and Dexter's kind of awkward anyway most of the time. So it just kind of goes back to that form of him being that way, but the guy's trying to make conversation about some date he's having, and then he also asks, do you have a charger? My phone's about to die. No charger. And he's like, oh, I'm kind of thirsty. Do you have any water? No. Do you want me to stop at a bodega? And the guy says, no, I'm going to be late. So he obviously gets a bad rating from this guy. And then we get in front, Dexter's going home, and then I noticed there's a camera outside of Blessing's front porch area, or a ring camera or a security camera of some sort, but he sees Dexter there kind of surmising about his reviews because it says low driver warning, and I guess Blessing says, you know, if you keep getting bad scores, you'll end up not having the job and they'll kick you off of it. So he's like, I'm going to make sure that we help you get this figured out. But I feel like the camera being right there is going to come into play in the future, or else I don't know why they would have shown us that. So I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel like it's going to come back into play at some point. Then we get this really cool throwback. For me, I share the same love for this one character, Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. I've loved that since I read the book and saw the film when I was way younger. Well, yeah, he's right back there actually. But Dexter always has, and you do see that, you know, in Original Sin, that, what is it? Oh, think of when he's doing his graduation picture, he's not smiling. Think of something that makes you happy. And he gets an image of the book American Psycho and gets that in his head. And then he also has Masuka make a fake ID for him, and it says Patrick Bateman. And this time, Veterinary RX is calling. And I don't know how Dexter seemed to get away with pretending to be a veterinarian. Somehow he did this, obviously back in Miami, because it says, oh, you know, it's been a long time since your order, Dr. Bateman. Trading in, you know, the sunny whatever of Florida for the busy streets of New York. And, you know, I guess, I don't know. It's just interesting, but I absolutely loved the callback to it, because I love Patrick Bateman myself, and I love that book, so I was pretty excited to see all that come to fruition again. So we get the detective, Claudette Wallace, who is aggravating to me. Like I said, probably by design, but, you know, she seems to think it was, you know, looking at that crime of Ryan Foster, and somehow seems to be pinning down Harrison for it, maybe because he was seen in the elevator with them, or he's also, Harrison is just seeming very bumbling, nervous, and, you know, he just looks guilty, like yeah. So I was really nervous about this, because I was thinking he's not as stealthy as Dexter, and then he ends up saying something like, because he said a day before, oh, you know, because he said there's no cameras of you going anywhere or something like that, and he says, well, I was with a girl last night, I don't remember her name. Like, well, you better figure it out, you know, because she's your alibi. And, you know, obviously we know this didn't happen. Well, then he says, you know, they come asking him, what's the name of the person, where's your alibi? And he says, and I got worried, because the detective is basically going over what exactly happened, and, you know, you did a good thing, you did a very noble thing, so no one's blaming you for that. Like, she's figured out how he did this and why he would do it, intervening in a situation that was really bad, but trying to make it seem like, you know, to admit. And he says, I have a confession to make, and I was so nervous when he did that, because he looks so freaking guilty. But he says, I have a confession to make, I live in the hotel, I'm homeless. And, you know, somehow that gets them a little off of his trail, because they confirm it with his friend Elsa, and she's like, are you not going to tell Stefan or anything, because I could lose my job? And, you know, they don't, but somehow that gets him out of, you know, off the hook for a short while, I'll say. And Dexter is doing his normal, natural vetting of Ronald Schmidt, who has no photos online, nothing. It's hard for him to find him. He has to use some sort of service that, you know, Blessing's wife used on Dexter, where she found out, oh, you used to live in Miami, because he's like, how did you know I lived in Miami? But it's some, you know, background check thing that you pay money for, and Dexter figured that out, and then he started looking for Ronald Schmidt. So it's very, yeah, there's no photos of this guy anywhere. He figures out, oh yeah, he works at the Bridge Network, and so I'm just going to be in this your car, and I'm going to find him. He sees, so at first I thought, how is this guy doing this? Because wouldn't it lead back to whoever the writer was? What he does is he goes to the car, and if the writer says, oh, are you John? And he'll say yes, and he'll get in, so obviously no one can track him. But that's what he's doing. Dexter's like, it's kind of interesting, it's kind of cool, I thought. He's like, pretends like he's taking a picture of himself, like whatever, and then I guess he keeps the camera on, and he just kind of does this like he's looking at it, and here comes Ronald Schmidt, and he sees, oh, his face is all whited out, so that is the guy. And then the car goes, are you Jerry? And he says yes, and then Dexter jumps around, or jumps in front. He goes, hey, don't take your car. And then the guy kind of looks like, oh, sorry, and then he leaves. And then Harry makes a thing about, Ghost Harry makes a thing about, you put your urge to kill over, or you put your urge to kill behind saving someone's life, and that he's never done that. Since when do you care about people? And I don't know if I agree with that, because I feel like Dexter's always cared about other people. to some degree. I mean, he's saved kids, he's saved people, so I don't really agree with that. I don't think this is some new thing for him. But interesting that they put that in there, making it seem like he's never done anything to save anybody, which, I mean, his whole morale for killing people is for that. So I don't really agree with that. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't agree with that statement. Oh, I don't know which episode it was, episode 1 or 2, where Angel is talking to Teddy, the guy that, you know, worked in Iron Lake, and, you know, he's like, I'm really worried about Jim Lindsay, Dexter, whatever, because, you know, he wasn't supposed to leave this early because he's still got that heart, you know, he's still healing, which is not really why he's worried. But he, you know, Teddy had said, well, I could put a search out for his truck and let you know if I find it, where it's at. So, meanwhile, Harrison had the truck, obviously, and I think the second episode, Harrison just got frustrated because of seeing that letter that his dad wrote Hannah McKay, and he gets all mad and he says Jim Lindsay, and then he's like, hey, do you want to buy this truck? Like, he doesn't want to be connected to it or anything, but it's under Jim Lindsay's name. So fast forward, you know, episode 3, Angel's back in Miami drinking, and then Teddy calls, and then he says, hey, I got a hit on that truck, it's in New York. So Batista immediately is like, I'm on my way out there. Well, then I wasn't expecting this. We see him at a restaurant, and he's looking at a picture of, you know, the 4 of them, or you know, a picture of Dexter and him and Masuka bowling, like an old photo, like he's reminiscing for a minute. Well, then the guys come in, which is Quinn, which I already said I knew he was going to appear, but what I was not expecting was Masuka, and I thought that was amazing. It felt so cool to see them in Miami in the bar, and, you know, Masuka making a dirty joke about, you know, OnlyFans, and basically Angel's announcing that he's retiring, that he's eligible for his pension, and that he's just going to do some traveling and settle an old score. And then, of course, Quinn's like, what do you mean settle an old score? And, you know, was this a Jason Statham movie or something like that? So, it, you know, and he's like, you don't ever have that one thing, you know, that you just can't let go of. And Quinn says, oh, you know, yeah, that, I don't know if she was Russian hooker, or no, not Russian hooker, I'm sorry, I should not have said, Russian stripper, which is in season 8, which I thought was funny. It's just cool to have that, you know, callbacks to old seasons. I love that. He's like, no, and you know, he doesn't want to tell them what he's doing, but this just proves now, I'm like, Batista is going to be on the trail of Dexter, and he is not going to let up on it. And when it all goes down, you'll understand why, and the less you know, the better. So he doesn't tell them, he doesn't let them in on anything. I still feel like maybe Quinn is going to make some sort of appearance or talk on the phone to Batista or something at some point. I don't think that's the end of seeing Quinn at all. But yeah, that was a really cool OG scene. See a scene, and I kept wondering why are we being shown this, but there's something about rats and getting into the house that Blessing has this like silver, really hard material, thick material, and he's putting it somewhere to deter rats, and Dexter's just kind of staring at it, and I'm like, what is he thinking about? Like, why are we fixated on this? Comes into play later on, and it makes sense now why, but I remember thinking, why are we watching this? We see a scene where Dexter's putting a turtleneck over very slowly, and, you know, he's going to go out, and he's got his M99, he has it, and he goes somewhere where he knows, oh, this is funny. Harry says something about, are you going to kill the Dark Passenger, or you're going after the Dark Passenger? And Dexter gets really mad. He goes, don't call him that. He's the imposter, you know. So it's hilarious that he's so bothered by the name thing. He's like, that's my name. That's my moniker, not his. He's the imposter. So, you know, he is setting out to do this. I think he goes where he thinks he might be. Somehow he figures out, I can't remember right now the details, but some girl comes up, some woman comes up. He's like, is this a car for Jessica or something? He's like, no, it's for Jerry, not Jessica. And I think when she came up, she scared or startled him, so he dropped the M99 between the seats, so that creates a lot of tension. And then here comes Ronald Schmidt, aka Red. You said Jerry? And he says yes, and he goes, that's me. And then he gets in the car, and he's sitting there trying to, like, it just creates a lot of really good tension because you're thinking, oh God, here it goes. And then he does get him, you know, he gets him with that thing, and with that, I don't know what kind of a saw it is. It's called something, and I can't remember the name. Let me know if you know in the comment section below. But it's funny because I think, you know, we figured out that this guy gets off on the suffering and the pleading of a person, and Dexter's not giving that to him at all. So I think he's like, what? You know, like, who's gonna miss you? He goes, oh, probably nobody. And he seems really, what do you mean nobody? You know, like, he's bothered by that. And then he says something about, you know, there's this thing inside me, I don't know, I just can't. He's like, what are you talking about? You know, my son won't even talk to me. And so it's I think it's throwing him off, Red, a little bit. But Dexter finally gets that thing, and he gets him. And then we realize, because I kept thinking, how is that not, because he had it around his neck pretty tight, even though he had that turtleneck on. We realized that silver thing was underneath it. That's why he was fixated on the thing that Blessing was using to deter rats. So that makes complete sense now. We get to where he, you know, has Red wrapped up. I don't know if it's his apartment. I don't know where it is exactly. But, you know, Ronald Schmidt, Red, wakes up and he's like, are you him? And Dexter says, him who? Who? He's like, the guy that broke into my house and left all that money with my trophies and that invitation. And Dexter's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he says, well, I didn't spend any of the money. You can have it all back. I don't want it. He's like, well, I'm sorry. I don't want your money. He's like, well, why are you here? It's because of all the innocent people you killed. And then this guy just goes off, he explains why he does what he does, which doesn't make, I mean, he gets mad. He goes, you think those people were innocent? And the reason he's going off killing these your car drivers is because his dad, he grew up in New York's entire life. He's never not lived there, but his dad, I guess, maybe got a taxi, spent all of his money on a taxi company, and then I guess maybe the ride share stuff started to take over, and his dad was in such debt that he, like, threw himself off a bridge or something, and then when he was found, his head was cut off. I think a boat maybe had done that, I don't know, and that's why he does this, but it just sounds so insane. And what does Dexter say? He says something like, well, I don't know, it was an iconic line. He says, I'm Dexter, and there's only room for, oh, he says, you stole my name. He goes, what name? Who are you? What name? And he's like, because, you know, he didn't call himself the Dark Passenger. That's what the public came up with. He says, I'm Dexter, and there's only room in this world for one Dark Passenger. And then he kills him. And then he, you know, says, oh, since the invitation and money was in the backpack, I'm going to go look at that. He reads the invitation, and it's talking about like-minded individuals, you know, and I forgot this part, but he brings him to a place to burn him up, which I'm, like, wondering now, is this going to be Dexter's new style of getting rid of bodies? Because that's exactly what he did in New Blood. He did that with Matt Caldwell, and I think Kurt Caldwell as well. So is this his new method? Because he's clearly not, like, chopping up bodies and dumping it into the ocean. That's what he did in, you know, Miami. So he doesn't do that. But as he's reading the invitation, the body is burning, and then it says something about thumbprint required for entry. So he freaks out and grabs, you know, whatever arm it is. It's obviously the left arm. He grabs that and he, you know, clears it up. And then somehow we go into the next episode. We are in episode 4. And it is called Call Me Red. Definitely one of my favorite Dexter episodes ever in the entire franchise, if not maybe my favorite episode. It is a 10 out of 10. It is absolutely incredible, great, just great all around. We open up with Dexter in Red's apartment. He's got that hoodie on. He's looking at his phone, so his face is all whited out, so he sees how that works. So he is planning to go to this serial killer dinner. And Harry is telling him, I don't know if this is a good idea. And, you know, he does something really cool. I don't know what he does, but he worked in forensics, so maybe it's just, and he's very smart, but he did something with the thumbprint where he made a mold of it and somehow got it on his finger to use. He's instructed to go, you know, by this park, and he'll have a ride, and it's Uma Thurman, and she's like, Ronald Schmidt, and he says, call me Red. And then they end up driving, you know, to Leon PRATER, which is Peter Dinklage's house. And what is it? Charlie is saying, you know, it took me 3 weeks to find you, but I have my ways, or something like that. And Dexter's inner monologue or inner dialogue, he said it took me 3 days. Like, he's way faster than her. So him and Charlie are driving to this party, or this dinner party, go into a thing, and then she's like, wait a minute, and she like kind of makes sure he doesn't have anything on him. He says, I had a box cutter in my sock because I didn't know what I was walking into. She confiscates that. She finds the license with the blood because it said to bring a trophy. And when she looks at it, she looks really disgusted by it. And then I remember her, when she first saw all the trophies, she said, you know, fucking psycho or whatever. So she looks very disgusted. So I don't know what her deal is, because she did kill that Canton Clubber guy. So we'll figure this out, I'm sure. It's kind of mysterious. The thumbprint almost does not work. It doesn't work 2 times. And, you know, Dexter's like, oh, it's sweaty. And she's kind of looking like, I feel like she's ready to, do something if it doesn't work, because for obvious reasons. It ends up working. And we see Dexter like putting his hand over his own heart, which I never see him do that. That's usually something he did in the beginning, like Original Sin, to feel the beating heart, and it excites him because of the fear that the person's experiencing. So he was feeling his own, and I kept thinking he's actually nervous to walk into this, and he should be. But, you know, we go in there, and then, you know, it's a nice place, and here we get Peter Dinklage, who is Leon Prater, and, you know, when he's meeting him in his inner dialogue, he's saying, you know, not exactly the man of the manner I was expecting. He's like, Ronald Schmidt, and then Charlie says he goes by Red. It's so nice to put a face with the name and all this, and, you know, he's showing him around, and he's saying something like, are you not like, or this is for, you know, I'm just a really big fan, because Dexter asks him, are you not like me? He says, oh, he laughs, he giggles about it, which made me laugh. He's like, oh heavens, no, I'm just a really big fan. I could never think to have, you know, the creativity and the imagination to do what you and the others do. And that's when he says, there's others coming, and he says, on their way. So you already know we're going to get introduced to these other serial killers. Now this part is absolutely insane. So he's like, I'm going to show you something. You know, he wants to show him his vault, and it's this, he goes, touch that button, you know. And all I'm thinking about too is his Dexter's fingerprints are all over this, you know, mansion. But he says, Charlie doesn't appreciate what I'm about to show you, so she leaves. And this is another thing about her being disgusted by the serial killer stuff. But he, you know, it opens up, and the first thing we see is a John Wayne Gacy clown uniform. And then we get a real quick flash of Scott Reynolds, who played John Wayne Gacy in a memory from Original Sin, which I thought was cool. There's another Original Sin showing. That was amazing. Then we see Jeffrey Dahmer's refrigerator with still got the blood on the, you know, on the bottom, and I was like, woof, it's weird, so weird. We see what is it, Ted Bundy's like car, or is this car seat, or I think it, not car seat, but seat that he had in one of his Volkswagen Beetles. I think that's what it is. It's a chair for sure. And then we see something else. What was it? Oh, Ed Gein's skin lamp. And I know there's other stuff like that they don't really show you, but there's a bunch of stuff in there, a bunch of trophies. And I'll include a link down below, but there's a spot where you can actually virtually go and look at the vault yourself of Prater's, you know, beloved vault of serial killer memorabilia. You can actually look in it, and this will come into play later with something that I've heard people say, which isn't actually true. But I just almost died when all of a sudden we see, you know, the hammer that belonged to Trinity Killer. And then immediately we get we hear Venus, the Venus song, which I love that song, but I'm always going to associate it with John Lithgow, the Trinity Killer. And then a flashback of Dexter killing him with the hammer. I don't know if it was the same hammer. I don't remember. But then this is insane. But we get a pedestal, and it's, you know, the blood slides. Prater does not say the killer's name or anything about it. All he says was, I won these from an FBI agent that had a gambling problem. That's all he says. Dexter can't help himself, and he runs his fingers like he always does across, and he's like, no, don't touch. He's like, sorry, sorry. And he just has this weird look on his face, like he can't believe his stuff is in there. Then I wasn't expecting this either. But I did think that was strange. He doesn't say James Dokes. He doesn't say, you know, Bay Harbor Butcher. He doesn't mention anything. No name. I don't know why, but that's weird to me. Then we get the Ice Truck Killer's table that he killed himself on. And we get a flashback of Dexter, you know, ending his brother's life on that table. And then Leon says something very strange. He says, you know, it's such a shame. If only Brian Moser had someone to talk to, someone like him, he might still be around. And Dexter's thinking in his head, you know, doubtful. But it was a weird thing to say, but I also don't know if maybe he was saying that because everybody thinks that he killed himself, and if he had been able to come to meetings like this, maybe he would have felt like he could talk. I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's meaning by that, or if it's something deeper than that. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation that maybe he knows who Dexter Morgan is, but I don't know if I'm completely getting that yet. I don't know what to think, honestly. There's a lot of theories out there about it. And I would think that they would, because my biggest question with the whole thumbprint thing is, first thing I asked was how do they know Ronald Schmidt's thumbprint? How do they know it? And how do they know the other ones? How do they know? I don't know if Charlie could have lifted it off, you know, in the apartment or in their belongings. That could very well be the reason. But this guy is a billionaire, and he also has ties to the FBI because he obviously has the blood slides from a FBI agent that had a gambling problem, and he just has all the money. So I don't know what to think about that yet. And then he shows some more trophies, like from other killers, and he's like, there's a spot here for yours, and he gets the license out, and I forgot the guy's name, but he goes, oh, you're first. It's truly an honor. And I kept thinking in my mind that Dexter's like the most prolific killer in here because he's responsible for all of his blood slides and 2 of these other ones in here. Y'all just don't know it, or maybe they do. I don't know. There's another thing that they show us. It's the New York Ripper, and I don't know what this thing is. It's like almost like a cane with it comes over like this. I don't know what it is, and I feel like this New York Ripper is going to come into play way more in this series because there's mention. So this Claudette Wallace, the detective that listens to Staying Alive to figure her stuff out and sees everything differently. Apparently, like, her partner Oliva is telling her, are you still fixated on this, talking about the Harrison thing? And she's like, well, there's just something missing. I just can't figure it out. I need to regroup and all this. And he's like, well, I don't want you to, you almost lost your job fixating on the New York Ripper case. So there's the mentioning of the New York Ripper. Also, Leon Prater said that he was never caught. He says that he was on the streets that Leon played on when he was a young kid. I don't know if that means that Leon was a kid when this guy was around or active, or it's the same neighborhood, the same area. So it could be one of the two. And there's theories out there that Blessing Kamara could be the New York Ripper, or it's Leon Prater that could be the New York Ripper. I don't believe it's Blessing, and I don't want to believe that. I don't want that to be the case, but I don't know. They sure do keep mentioning the New York Ripper in different situations. So so we meet the serial killers. The first one to come is Mia. She's also known as Lady Vengeance. That's what the public calls her. She's known for taking out sexual predators, which Dexter is very intrigued by this because it could mean that she has a very similar code to what he does. And she's a wine sommelier. They have really good chemistry together. Then we meet Rapunzel, Al Jolly, and he's like on the phone talking to somebody. Oh, that's great, honey. So he's like the Family Guy, which is kind of a callback because he's got all these daughters and he's married and he's got the glasses and he seems like just a sweet big old bear hug of a guy. But he's the one that had he's Ponytail Guy. So there's like ponytails like in a vault that, that's his trophy. So I'm like, I don't know what the story is there. I know we'll probably figure it out at some point, but he goes by Rapunzel. I mean, that's his name. And I know Dexter asks, or he's always curious because it's kind of like Trinity Killer or like BTK, like a family man that somehow is able to do this. And Rapunzel says something about it's not selfish, it's self-care. And then we get Neil Patrick Harris, which I was really excited to meet his character. He is the tattoo collector. So it's kind of gross when you think about it, but I guess what he does is he gets these tattoos on these people, and he wants those tattoos, so he ends up skinning it off of their body, and I guess obviously they end up dying. And I can tell Mia does not like him. I think she's just grossed out, skeezed out by him. Then we get the last one to come, and it is Gareth, and he is the Gemini killer, who is played by David Dismulchen. He is very quiet, keeping stuff very close to the vest, and I think that's by design. There's some, I mean, he's gonna play a way bigger part than we even realize. I think he might be the big bad. That's why we don't know much about him. But, you know, Al Jolly, the Rapunzel, asking him, you know, do you want to fill us in on your year? And he says, I'd rather not. So he's very secretive and he doesn't say much at all. Well, then everybody sits down to eat, and there's these like gigantic, I think they're tomahawk steaks, and Dexter's so excited, you know, he loves steak. He thinks he's getting that. But remember, Ronald Schmidt is a vegan, because we saw Charlie, you know, getting a vegan ice cream out of the freezer at that guy's place when she was looking for trophies. So he's like, what is it that he gave him? It was something, I have it written down. It was hand-seared cauliflower with a sweet potato puree, and then some other thing on there. And he goes, and there's plenty more where that came from. He's like, Charlie saw all your vegan cookbooks, which if it was me, I would have said, oh, that's just something I was trying, but I actually don't want to do that, because I don't know how but he doesn't say anything, so he just keeps pretending that he is this person and eats, you know, that food. Then it's presentation time, and Neil Patrick Harris, the tattoo collector, does like a slideshow, or, you know, he stalks it. He's got a victim named Jules that he's, you know, going to get. That's what he says. And she had a 15-year-old dog that just passed away, and of course Rapunzel's like, oh, poor Pooch. So he's still playing into that role of being this family man guy, which I thought was funny. And so he's showing all this stuff, and he shows, and so she's going to get a tattoo of that dog on her sleeve, and that's the tattoo he wants next. And he says, before I leave New York, she will be, you know, it's inevitable what's going to happen. And then Dexter in his head is like, well, you just went to the top of my list of who he's going to kill. So that's that. And then Leon Prater says something, I don't mean to call you out, Red, but that money is for a show and tell, or like a presentation. And then he says something to him later, like, you know, we want to know the real Dark Passenger, which is also weird. I don't know. But the whole time that they're talking about, like, their urge to kill, like, they all call it something. Mia calls it the itch. Rapunzel calls it the need. I don't know what Neil Patrick Harris calls it, because he doesn't. He's the one with the presentation up there. And then Gemini Killer is like staring at Dexter. Really weird, really weird. I thought this was very strange. But he says, the great yearning. And then Dexter says the urge. So it's very interesting, and I think Dexter almost feels a little at home, because he's able to say things that he would never be able to say otherwise, because they all like to, you know, murder people. This whole dinner too, it was honestly reminding me of American Horror Story Hotel, where there was a serial killer dinner in one of those episodes. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Let me know if you do in the comment section. But it's, yeah, American Horror Story Hotel, and it's Evan Peters who's playing this character named James Patrick Marsh, who I think owned the hotel. And all the guests, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Richard Ramirez, Eileen Wuornos, maybe another one I can't remember, but they're all dead serial killers at this party. So it just reminded me of that. It was weird. I don't know. Very interesting, very, very cool thing to remember. But anyway, let me know if you've seen that, and if it reminded you of this or not. Batista goes to the hotel because he obviously finds out that Harrison works there. And this was weird to me. He's sitting in the bar. Harrison walks by, and he's like, El Diablo, which means, you know, devil. I don't know why he would say that. But he, you know, says, oh, I worked with your father in my metro years ago. I was really good friends with him. He, you know, he's a witness at my wedding to my ex-wife. I knew your Aunt Deb. My younger sister Jamie used to babysit you. And then, you know, Harrison does remember that. And then they kind of make small talk back and forth. And then he says something about, I was in Iron Lake recently, and then Harrison says, oh, so you know what happened, you know, in the news. Angel figures out, oh, he thinks that Dexter's dead, and he doesn't tell him anything. He just goes with it, and he goes, sorry for your loss. And he's like, you can tell me anything that your dad may have said to you. My ex-wife, had notions that he might be at the Bay Harbor Butcher. And I didn't know what Harrison was going to say because he thinks his dad is dead, but luckily he stands on business and says, I don't know what you're talking about. That's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. And he doesn't give anything away, and Batista's really saying, your dad is dead now, so, which is not true, but he's saying that to him. He's like, nothing you can say can hurt him. And Harrison's like, I gotta go, and he doesn't give anything up, which I was so happy that he didn't. I thought that was really good. But yeah, so Batista's not getting anything out of Harrison at all. So back at that serial killer party, when they're all Dexter is like, talking to Mia the most, and he's like, what is this? And, what does Prater get out of it? And she's like, why don't we meet tomorrow and I can, we can talk or whatever. So they make plans to meet. Then Charlie gives all of them cell phones, which, these phones are definitely going to be tracked, but it's for them all to stay in communication with each other while they're there. And of course Dexter's like, there's gonna be more of these, and Leon says, I have so many events planned the next 2 weeks, I'm excited, blah blah blah. So they all have these phones, so you just know these phones are being tracked. There's no way they're not. Concerned because now Dexter has his fingerprints on that vault button, on wine glasses, on cutlery, on whoever knows what else in that house, his real prints. So I don't know what to think about that. If they know, or if they don't know enough, like maybe they know he's not. I don't know what to think about all that, but I know there's a lot of theories, and I would love to hear your theories down below. Like, do you think they know who he is, or do you think they just know that he's not red, or what? I mean, I don't know. I'm definitely going to make a video this week about my theories on the Gemini killer, so I'm excited to talk about that whenever that time comes for that, so be on the lookout for that. The Prater Vault experience, if you go online, and like I said, I will link it down below in the information area, you can look at all the other stuff that is actually in the vault that he didn't mention, which includes, a lot of people were saying, oh, there's no name against the blood slides. It doesn't say, anything about the Bay Harbor Butcher. It actually does, but you would only know that if you go and actually look into the vault. And it says James Dokes, the Bay Harbor Butcher. So there's that. There's also season 6, the Doomsday Killer, Tom Hanks' son, Travis, the character's name, it's his sword from season 6. So the Doomsday Killer sword, that is in there, but they don't mention that. And then there's also some other serial killer, actual, like real serial killers, I want to say, but it's obviously all replicas of a lot of the stuff in there, so it's actually worth going to look at, and I highly recommend that you do that. So I know people were saying, oh, there was nothing by the slides, but there actually is. It does say James Dokes, BHB. But the thing that's weird to me, like I said before, is that when Prater was showing, oh, the hammer from Trinity Killer, the table from the ice truck killer, he was specifically saying the weapon and the name of the killer. When the blood slides came, which was in between those two, he didn't say the Bay Harbor Butcher. All he said was an FBI agent that has a gambling problem is how I got those. So I don't know. I think that's weird. The thing I forgot to mention, we're talking about trophies, was that in the very beginning, toward the beginning of this episode, is that, remember, the Ryan Foster guy that Harrison murdered, he had given him his watch to go fix because it stopped working. So Harrison took it somewhere, some repair place. They end up calling Harrison's phone, says, oh, your watch is ready. He says, oh, well, I can't come pick it up. I can pick it up later. And then they say, oh, no problem. We'll just drop it off at the hotel. What's the guest's name? And then he kind of freaks out and says, oh, no, I'll come get it. I'll come get it. And for me, my only problem with this is that I don't know why he couldn't just say, oh, that belonged to, Ryan Foster, this hotel guest that was murdered. So I don't know what you want to do with the watch. He should have just said that, because it just looks weirder and more suspicious him keeping it. My husband kind of had this theory that maybe he unknowingly is keeping a trophy. I don't know, but it just seems silly the way that he handled that, because I'm like, the way you handled that, it makes you look makes you look more guilty. You could have just said, plus, you know, when I said before, Stefan actually saw him take that watch, so I don't know. And his name is actually inscribed on the inside of the plate, it says Ryan Foster, so Harrison takes it and he keeps it, and throughout the episode, it's ticking and ticking and ticking and ticking and ticking. It's very much reminiscent of Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Telltale Heart, which is one of my favorite stories, which is basically a story about guilt, except that it's a heart that just keeps beating and beating, and it keeps getting louder and louder and louder, which is basically what's happening to Harrison with this watch. So all of this happened before he ran into Batista and before the serial killer dinner and all that stuff. When Harrison and Batista have their meetup, you know, he kind of leaves, I don't know, having that look on his face, like, I don't know what you're talking about and I have to go. Well, his friend Elsa, you know, she's protective of him, and she sees that Batista was just, because he gave him his card, if you ever want to talk to me about anything, call me, there's my number. And he was putting his thing back, so all Elsa sees is his badge, and she gets protective and goes over there, you know, if you think that Harrison had anything to do with that murder, you're wrong. And then, of course, Batista's like, what murder? He's like, Ryan Foster, the guy that was murdered here, whenever it was, and he was cut up into, you know, 9 pieces. And this immediately gets Batista going. And something that a lot of people haven't mentioned is that this is a fact, that Batista knows that this kill would not have been Dexter because it actually happened when they both were still in Iron Lake. So he knows it's not Dexter, which makes me think he obviously is on to thinking that Harrison is following in his dad's footsteps. So Batista obviously figures out what detective is the lead on that case, and then he goes, and of course he's not going to let it go. He's like a dog with a bone, so he goes over to her and says, you know, and this is in the midst of her and her partner Oliva talking about her obsession with the New York Ripper and how she needs to, you know, stay focused and not get wrapped up into something. And he's like, hey, can I speak to you about that Ryan Foster case? It's eerily similar to a case that I worked in Miami. And we don't see the conversation, but you just know it's not going to be good. So anyway, all that's happening. Dexter decides to meet up with Mia, you know, to learn more about PRATER and all that. So they meet up for a jog, and, you know, they talk and stuff, and she just says, you know, because he's like, you don't think he's a killer? And she says, oh no, I don't think he's a killer himself. I think he's a vampire, he's a voyeur, he's a watcher. He wants to know all the dirty, gory details, but I don't think that he's a killer himself. And he asks about, so what happened with that Keith guy, or you know, what's the rules and all this stuff. And she says, well, one guy was uninvited. Another guy ended up getting arrested and went to prison and allegedly killed himself. And then she says allegedly, so it's almost implying that maybe they had him murdered or something, or somebody murdered him in prison because he might have been a liability because of this network of all this information about these serial killers and et cetera, et cetera. They have chemistry. You know, she kind of tells her story about, because her name's Lady Vengeance according to the public, and, you know, she had a younger sister named Hazel who she learns was, you know, getting abused by their stepfather, and at that time Mia had already left and she thought Hazel was too young, and then he had already, you know, something had already happened with her, so she actually ends up murdering the guy. And then she just kind of keeps, you know, that's what we think she does anyway. So it seems like she has a code. They go back to her Airbnb, because she is from out of town. I think her kills are in Boston, I want to say. But she goes there, and of course she's like, I got these really delicious pastries. And one of them, because he grabs for a pastry, you know, Dexter, and she's like, oh no, here's the vegan one, and it's a kale one. He's like, oh, thanks for remembering. This whole vegan thing is so frustrating for him. I know it is. Well then, you know, she has, because she also was a ballerina, she has a little music box, which is, I had one identical to this because I used to be a ballerina too. It's got a little ballerina in it, there's a mirror in it, and it's like to hold your jewelry and everything, and she shows him, and it's like all of her trophies. Like there's dog tags in there, there's watches, there's bracelets, there's cufflinks, and she tells him, you know, I can remember each and every one of them still, like perfectly. So those are her trophies, so she has those, she showed them to him. Then she says, because there's a lot of chemistry between them, she's gonna go take a shower, she leaves the door open. that she has an Italian espresso machine in there, and she kind of leaves it open, looks back at him kind of like, you know, and my first thought was that maybe is she baiting him to see if he's a predator. That was what I thought, but I don't think that's what was happening, because it seemed like she just wanted to, you know, hook up with him. And he's fighting himself, and then, you know, Harry says his goofy thing that Ghost Harry says, you know, showering with serial killers. And, you know, then he realizes he needs to go meet up, because he had already made a phone call to meet up with Lowell, Neil Patrick Harris. He's like, I want to know more about your skins, which for some reason made me laugh. So he's got to go meet Lowell. He meets Lowell, happy hour, and Lowell's kind of getting all like, you know, there's a tattoo parlor. He goes, well, I might actually have to leave because, you know, across the street, you know, that's his next victim. He says, you know, she's got way higher pain tolerance than I thought she would. I'm gonna have to do this tonight. And, you know, he's saying this is more of a me thing, not a we thing. And Dexter's like, oh yeah, I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. And you see Neil Patrick Harris looking across at that tattoo parlor, looking at his potential victim and having this look on his face. But meanwhile, it comes into focus. Dexter has this look that I cannot describe. It's this look like, I don't know, it shows like the true killer inside Dexter, and I saw it then, and I don't know, it was, I mean, it's awesome. It was just a crazy thing that I saw. And then Dexter realizes they leave, and Dexter realizes, oh crap, you know, it's going to take me, on his phone, he looks 117 minutes to get back to get his tools. He doesn't have that kind of time. He's like effing New York, of course. Well, we find out that Lowell, Neil Patrick Harris, is an anesthesiologist by day, so he has his tools with him. He did show Dexter that he has them. And what ends up happening, the girl leaves. She's got her headphones in, which is kind of like Harrison, and I'm always thinking, why would you have your headphones in on a busy street or just outside where you can't hear anything? You're kind of at a disadvantage against whatever's happening around you. That always makes me nervous. Like, I don't do that because I'm scared that I'm not hearing something around me, because you're not. And he almost gets there, and then Dexter uses his own equipment, you know, count back from 3, gets to the tattoo parlor. He's like, wow, you know, the tattoo parlor really has everything that I need, all the wrap, and, you know, Lowell has all his tools already with him. You know, Lowell wakes up and he's like, you know, whatever. He's like, you're already going to be messing with Prater's rules day one. That's pretty ballsy. And, you know, I was like, well, this is the part where you usually start screaming. And he's like, well, I've been on the other end of this to know when it's inevitable. It's like, sorry to droop your jaw. Which kind of it makes me think about the other guy, the red guy, and Dexter messing up his whole getting off on, you know, somebody, you know, begging for their life type thing. So you see that twice, really. And then he's getting his blood slide. He, you know, cuts his cheek, and then he puts it in this. And of course, Lowell is like, "That's your trophy?" And he's like, "Yes." He's like, "That's pretty lame for somebody that saws off heads." Dexter sighs. There was something I couldn't be honest about the other night. Oh yeah, what's that? I'm not actually Ronald Schmidt. I was like, oh, well, who are you? He's like, Dexter Morgan. Well, who's that? And he's like, first time he's ever admitted to this, the Bay Harbor Butcher. And then all of a sudden, then Lowell wants to scream and say something, and he's like, you know, and fuck, and then he, you know, kills him. And then you hear all this like, you. And it dies off, and it'll forever drive me insane. I wanted to know what he was going to say. I want to know what he was going to say. It's going to drive me insane. But my husband mentioned to me, you know, that's the first time that Dexter's ever referred to himself as the Bay Harbor Butcher, because through all the OG seasons, he hated that name. He couldn't stand it. So it's like in this new series, he's actually accepting who he really is, you know. You know, somebody took his little, you know, what he calls his urge, the dark passenger. That guy's dead. Oh, and Lowell also had said early before he was going to kill, you know, Jules, he said, tonight's the night, baby. Like, in a different way, but tonight's the night. And I think, you know, he took Dexter's catchphrase, so gone now. But the thing I'm concerned about is the phone situation. Are they going to I mean, there's no way they're not tracking any of this. So, you know, Dexter takes him to the incinerator. Again, like I said, I wonder if this is his new way of disposing. And he puts him in the incinerator. He says, Lowell, meet Red. Which was kind of funny. But, just so interesting, because it's like, what is going to happen now? You know, there's no way there, you know, Lowell is not going to be at meetings now, and that's going to be suspicious. So, you know, we're left wondering that. Then we, you know, obviously from what we remember, Batista figured out about this murder. You know, Harrison's friend is clearly upset at Harrison, and Harrison's like, oh, what's good? And he's like, why is this fedora-ass cop at my door? I don't know why I thought that was funny, this fedora-ass cop. And Harrison says, he's like, did you sell me a stolen truck? And he's like, no, that was my dad's truck. He goes, well, you better figure it out, because he's right there. And then we get this slow-mo walk of Batista, and it's so ominous. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. He is just not going to let it go. And then he confronts Harrison again, you know, and he says, you know, you might know about a guy named Ryan Foster, came in one piece, left in 9. And like I said earlier, no one is mentioning this that I've heard, but Batista knows that that couldn't have been Dexter, because Dexter was in Iron Lake when this murder happened. So it's clearly got to be Harrison. And, you know, he starts, you know, confronting him and saying, you know, it's what's crazy to me, you know, it's not so crazy, because Harrison says, well, that's crazy, I hope they catch the guy. And Batista says, what's crazier is when the son of a known serial killer is at a hotel. So it's either somebody is copying him, or they learn something like that, or they learned from him. So which is implying, you know, Harrison. And then Harrison still doesn't budge, even though he looks scared. He's like, you know, it sounds like you've gone down a real big conspiratorial rabbit hole. I hope you can find your way out, or good luck getting out of it. And then he leaves. And I'm just nervous AF. And I'm also nervous for Batista, because as we know in the OG series, anybody that does not let this go and follows and really just tries to, you know, go after Dexter, like Dokes, LaGuerta, they end up dying, and it's not by Dexter's hand, it's by something else that happens. And I'm worried, because he's not going to let this go. There's no way he's going to let this go. I'm almost worried that Harrison might do something. I don't think Dexter would do anything to Batista, because it's not part of his code, and that was his friend. But I don't know about Harrison. Harrison up against the wall with his impulsiveness, I don't know. And Batista also had mentioned to Harrison that I did not mention your name yet, but makes me very nervous that something is going to, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of high stakes right now. So meanwhile, you know that Harrison has that watch, and it's the ticking and the ticking and the ticking and the ticking, and it's making him crazy. The Telltale Heart, the story of guilt, very similar, like I said earlier. He doesn't know what to do with himself. He goes over to Elsa's place, and they hang out and watch RuPaul's Drag Race or something. That's what they usually watch together and laugh about it and everything. And she's like, you know, you can stay here tonight, because she knows he doesn't really have a place to stay besides some random room in the hotel. And they're friends. He's babysat her kid before. And there is nothing that would make me think that she doesn't, that she isn't interested in him. There's nothing that she's done to make me think she's not interested in him. They have a flirtation. Anyway, he does try to go in and kiss her, and she turns it down and says, you just have so much going on. And then I think it embarrassed him, and he leaves. And he's just like, you know, I fuck up everything. You know, he's just got, you know, he's not doing well. And then Batista, you know, is like, I want to, you know, the whole thing that Batista says, I really hope that you don't end up like your father. You know, a lot of innocent people died because of your father. You know, Maria LaGuerta, your Aunt Deb, your mother, you know, all this stuff. He's just trying to say all this so maybe, you know, Harrison would say something. So all of this whole conversation is just echoing and echoing and echoing. And, you know, like we've said from the beginning, Harrison has guilt. He's haunted by stuff. He is not like Dexter in that way. So this ticking watch is like, you know, driving him a little crazy. And I just really hope you don't turn out like your father. Which is, I think that really bothered, I mean, all of this is bothering him. So we see him make a phone call to Detective Wallace. She doesn't answer. So then he's thinking about going up to the precinct. He's right in front of NYPD, and this is how the episode ends of episode 4. All of a sudden, you see a hand get on Harrison. It says, Harrison, don't. Turns around. It's Dexter. And Harrison's, Dad? And then the episode cuts. So they reunited, you know, and I was worried that we weren't going to see that until like maybe the finale or the penultimate episode. I was really thinking that that was going to be the case, and I was thinking, I don't want to I want them to have seen each other or talk or something way before, you know, the end, and we got that basically halfway through the season. So here we go into episode 5, which is the most recent episode, Murder Horny. You know, we immediately open with, you know, that scene, and Harrison, I think at first is thinking that he's hallucinating. He's like, wait a minute, no, you're dead, I killed you. And he's kind of freaking out, and Dexter says, we can talk about this, but not here. So he takes him back to his apartment underneath where Blessing lives, and they start talking. And this whole line made me laugh. He's like, you're like a goddamn horror movie villain, you know, like Michael Myers or that guy in the hockey mask, like you think they're dead and they're not. And then there's an inner monologue where Dexter says, we do have some similarities, which made me laugh, because I mean, obviously I do, it's obvious. I love Michael Myers, I love Jason, all that stuff. So that was funny to me. And then he's like, why are you in jail? You know, why aren't you in jail? He just has all these questions. So he is still going to be angry. He is still angry. He's shocked, you know, and he's like, well, the blood flow, you know, how are you not dead? He's like, the blood flow, the cold stopped my blood flow. So it, you know, I survived. And then he goes, and why aren't you in jail? And he said, because Chief Bishop realized that, you know, Logan shot at me and it was self-defense, so she dropped the charges. So he explained that, you know, and he also says, I know about Ryan Foster. And Harrison looks a little freaked out, and he goes, you know, I was just like you at your age. He's thinking that Harrison is just like him. He goes, I always had that, you know, and we get a callback scene with Patrick Gibson in the OG series where, you know, this guy's going to assault Deb, and Dexter doesn't let that happen, but then Dexter sees a knife and almost, you know, does something with it, and then Deb tackles him and it stops. So I love that we're seeing that. I love that so much. And he's like, I was just like you at your age. I thought about killing all the time, and when I did it, it felt like a release. And immediately, you know, Harrison's like, release? He's like, I'm in hell. Which obviously, you know, that he goes, I still have this watch, and it's the ticking and the ticking and the ticking, and it just won't stop. And, you know, he feels guilty. Obviously, he was gonna go turn himself in, and then I think Dexter has this look in his eye like he's surprised and shocked, and I don't know if he's disappointed, but he's realizing, you're not like me. You're not like me. But he tries to make him feel better about, just think about if you hadn't done that, how many other women. And he's like, well, you know, he's just mad still, you know. Harrison is still very mad and out of all sorts. And so Dexter says, let me hold that watch for you. And it was kind of an emotional moment to me, because the ticking is, you know, louder and louder, and it's just, you could tell it's driving Harrison crazy. And he's like, let me carry that for you, kind of like, let me carry this burden for you. And as soon as it comes into Dexter's hands and he puts his fingers around it, it stops. Which I'm like, that has to be some sort of relief for Harrison. Like, that's why we don't hear it anymore. And I thought this from the beginning. Okay, so Mia, remember Lady Vengeance, goes after sexual predators. She showed Dexter her box of trophies, which is stuff like watches and, you know, bracelets and stuff like that. So somehow, I'm like, somehow this is going to be connected. I don't know how. I don't know if, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, but somehow this is going to be connected, because it is way too similar. And as we see, as the episode goes further, it does. Just like I thought that it would. And I also had suspicions that Mia's not going to turn out the way that Dexter thinks that she is. And this does happen, and we'll get there. So, you know, Dexter's like, do you want to go get a bite? And he's like, what? No, you don't just get to come back from the dead and start hanging out with me. I'm not ready for this, you know. And he bolts and leaves. So then Dexter feels very alone, and he calls Mia, and they go on a date. They go bowling, and makes me think immediately of like how great a bowler Dexter is, how his biological father was a great bowler. So they bowl, and they're both actually really good at it. They have really good chemistry. They're talking, and then she's, you know, she's a wine sommelier, so she's having him like describe, what do you think this tastes like? And he's like, I don't know what he says, but, you know, like food or like certain descriptive words. And she's like, it can remind you of a place or something. It doesn't have to be, you know, food or anything like that, or a scent. And then he says, Miami, after it rains. Now, that is something that's interesting, because the Bay Harbor Butcher is notoriously from Miami. That's where he's from. And she's like, I didn't know you. I thought you were a New Yorker that stayed here your whole life. And he goes, no, I grew up in Miami. So he's already starting to tell things to her, and he had already said to Harry that he might reveal who he really is, because she has a code and she may be relieved. to know that they're the same. Well, I was like, that's gonna, I don't know, somehow that's gonna come back. Maybe it won't, but him saying Miami, because I do remember Red, or Ronald Schmidt, saying that he'd been in New York his entire life. He told a driver that. So as we go further, you know, she also mentions that she wanted to collab on a kill with him, which I think he was thinking was weird. And that's when he's contemplating maybe telling her who he really is, because maybe they share a same code. Well, then he meets up with her that night at a wine bar, and, you know, he quickly figures out her origin, you know, the origin story. And so he's like, but so, you know, he's asking all these questions, and she's like, actually, you know, it's the media that made me Lady Vengeance. I am the predator. You know, I like to kill. So he quickly figures out real quickly that she does not have a code, and she doesn't care who she kills. It could be anybody. She has no conscience about that. So she is just as bad as the rest of the serial killers that, you know, were at that dinner, and the ones that he's killed. So he's kind of freaking out inside, you know, and she's like, is everything okay? He's like, everything in his, you know, in mental dialogue, he's like, everything is the opposite of okay. So she's wanting to go collab on a kill. He goes, I have the kill kit in the car. And all this whole time I'm thinking, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? And she's thinking it's going to be the killing, like, I want to see you decapitate someone, you know, the dark passenger killer. That's why she was never bothered by any of that, it seems. So she just goes to some random car. Hi, and the driver asks, are you Jessica? And she's like, yes. And then Dexter stops it again. He goes, no, ours is an SUV. And she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, you don't have a hoodie like me. Well, why didn't you think about that before? And she's like, I think you're having a little bit of performance anxiety. He's like, I probably am. I'm not really ready to let anybody in on what I do in my process. And then she gets all, you know, frustrated. And she goes, you know, the other day in the shower and now this, you're just a tease. Which made me laugh. But she goes, well, now you've got me all murder horny, which is where the title of the episode comes into play. And she goes, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find somebody. So now he knows, you know, and, you know, since he has that trophy, he's like, I can't kill her. That would be too weird. It'd be too obvious, because Lowell's already dead. They don't know that yet, as far as he knows. But Mia can't be dead now, too. So he knows where her, you know, place is. He plants the watch in that box of her trophies, which I knew this was going to happen. I knew it. I knew that, and I knew she was too good to be true. And he opens the windows a certain way. He also puts like a spray can of like oxidized bleach, which was what was used to clean up the scene of Ryan Foster. So he's framing her for this. And then he uses this fake New York accent, which to me, I kept saying it's like a Wahlberg is on the phone, like, you know, Lady Vengeance, there's a guy screaming over here, you gotta get over here now, you know, are you kidding me, Lady Vengeance? And then they do get her in the midst of her act. So the way she does stuff looks pretty barbaric. Like, I was kind of horrified by it. She has all these tools where she like gouges their eyes out. Ugh, just all this stuff while they're suffering. So she likes to torture them. And you know, she had said prior, oh no, they just think so, because Dexter had asked her prior to this, so those trophies you have, those guys are innocent, and she's like, define innocent. So, and the guy that I think she met at this bar, you know, that she took back there, I think was innocent. I don't, you know, they just labeled him a predator after I've killed them because of the moniker Lady Vengeance. So anyway, the cops come, they get her before she does anything, they tackle her, arrest her, and that watch comes up, and something just seems a little too, I don't know. I just know that detective, that Claudette Walls, is going to be wondering about this, and God forbid they question her, because she's going to say, I don't know what that's not my kill. Which is so stressful. There's so many stakes, high stakes right now. So, you know, Harrison sees the news and immediately is at Dexter's door, and he's like, was that you? He's like, that's not really your style, you know, to frame a serial killer. And Dexter ends up telling him, you know, they have a really big heart-to-heart, and he's like, you know, it was wrong of me to try to make you like me and mold you in my image. You're not like me, you're better than me. And he tells him the truth about Rita. He's like, you know, I was so obsessed with figuring out how to be, you know, I was surprised when your mother Rita loved me, and then I had you, and then I didn't know how to do what I do and be a family man. So he like said that Trinity was his mentor And then he said, you know, the problem was I was stupid and got too close to all of it, and the night that I killed Trinity, when I came home, he had already killed your mother. And it was selfish of me. She died because of my selfishness. And I was just so relieved when he said that. I wanted to cry. But, you know, he basically says, you know, you're all I have. Because he said something about, you know, how do I know, how do I know that more innocent people aren't going to die because of you? Because maybe you being in my life will be that. Well, then Harrison starts saying, what about Captain LaGuerta, Aunt Deb? And then Dexter's like, look, how do you know about that? What are you talking about? He's like, Batista. He mentions Batista. And he's like, oh, you know, I can tell he's kind of a little inner panic. And then he says, you know, well, Batista has nothing on me because I just saw him 2 weeks ago in Iron Lake. And then the realization hits Harrison that, so he let me think that you were dead. This entire time, he let me think you were dead. And he's like, well, he was just manipulating you. You know, and I might be saying some of this out of order because he's like, well, that doesn't mean, that may be true, but not everything he was saying, you know, is not everything he was saying was a lie. That's when he talks about the LaGuerta and Deb and you know, his mother and all that, and that's when Dexter tells him the true story, and it's basically like, you're all I have. And then I knew Harrison was going to say, you know, he would feel that same way, so he grabs Dexter's hand, and it's like, you know, they are all that each other has. And, it's emotional. But there's so many high stakes, and I'm just so worried about everything that's going to happen. I don't know, you know. So Mia's, you know, arrested. She comes to Leon. Oh, I forgot to mention, Leon PRATER has this, like, interview, and he turns out he was an orphan. His parents were killed by drunk drivers. A policeman saved him in the car, and he doesn't want to go on record saying that he pays for any of the kids that get adopted from that orphanage that he lived at. He pays for the parents' you know, mortgages or whatever. He doesn't want that on record. There's a lot more to this guy, and I cannot figure it out, but he's this billionaire, self-made billionaire. He, you know, so I forgot about that. So we hear more about that. Then obviously we see that Mia's arrested. Uma goes to talk to, or Charlie, I should say, to Leon, and he's watching himself, amused with himself, laughing at his own jokes of his own interview, which, like, I'm not really surprised by that. But she goes, you know, Mia's, you know, something, but we have a problem. Like, I can't get to her, the FBI, this and that, and I can't get to her, you know, soon enough, or I can't talk, whatever, something like that. And he goes, I thought I hired you to fix problems. Did I make a mistake? And then she says, no, sir, you did not. And he turns his TV back on, kind of like, you just go figure it out. I was like, man, he's a tough guy to work for, but I'm sure she's being paid a lot. Another scene happens where she goes to a hospital. It's clearly her mother that's in this hospital. I looked at the paperwork, and it's basically her mother's dying of stage 4 brain cancer, which is pretty awful. And she tells a story, or she tells her about, you know, her day, like that she's a 3rd grade teacher, and this girl Tanisha finally spoke in front of the class. Remember that little girl I told you about? And it's like, I don't know if she was a teacher or if she is a teacher along with this job or what, but she clearly, her mom doesn't know the reality of what she's actually doing as a job. So I don't know what's going on there, but it really gave more of a heart to Charlie, and probably why she's disgusted by all the serial killer stuff. But I think this money that she gets from Leon, since he's a billionaire, he probably pays her pretty damn well. It's probably, you know, bankrolling and financing, you know, this medical care that her mom is getting. So it's kind of sad. Anyway, Mia gets to the prison. This is where the scene, the episode ends. She, you know, or Charlie, oh my God, I can't think straight. Charlie gets to the prison where Mia is, and she's like, I thought I was going to be talking to a lawyer. She goes, I went to Harvard. And they talk, and then she's like, well, I'm not going to make any demands or requests. I'm not going to say anything, you know, because she's kind of a liability to them now, which I think is why the guy that she mentioned last episode, there was some killer that got arrested and then he just ended up dying in prison by his own hand, allegedly. That's what she said, remember? So I think she's worried that they might kill her. And I don't know what to think. I can't tell, because Charlie says our mutual friend appreciates that, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure your stay here is comfortable and as short as possible. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. And I also don't know, you know, if she's going to say something. I mean, I don't know what's going to come into play with this Ryan Foster and the planning of that, because we see a scene where Batista, will not freaking let it go, is talking, I think, because he sees then the headline, oh, Lady Vengeance, Ryan Foster's, and he's like, what the fuck? Like, and he's got a map up there with Jim Lindsay, Dexter Morgan's like mugshot, and then he's got pictures of Harrison that he took randomly, like when Harrison didn't realize it. So he's gonna bring all that to the NYPD, and they start digging around and thinking about this 9-piece. I'm really concerned. There's a lot of high stakes going on, and also Mia's in jail. What if she says something about, you know, Miami? Because Ronald Schmidt didn't grow up in Miami. I don't know. There's so many things going on, so many high stakes, so many complications, and I don't know. I'm just worried. I'm worried. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know all of your theories down below. Are you loving this season as much as I am? Because I am. It's got me in a chokehold where I just, like, even at night I can't sleep. I'm thinking about it. I'm worrying about it. I'm theorizing all the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to have any more Dexter content, because I've been a fan for quite a few years now. And yeah, just let me know, because I would love to sit here and just talk about Dexter nonstop. All right, have a very creepy night. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.